I just want to talk a little bit about mental health. That's something that engineers don't talk about too often, and I figured it'd be a good time to talk about it. This is just a story about my life and how I've experienced different types of mental health issues. I'm not preaching it. I'm not saying that it's the end all be all. I'm not saying that you need therapy or medication or anything. This is more just to share my story with you guys and hopefully maybe inspire or kind of normalize some of these things that do happen to people. So I've been in engineering for about 12 years now. Before that, I was in school, and during my school times, I was always very active. I was never stressed, never anxious. I had really good time management skills, which really helped with dealing with homework, dealing with assignments. I performed well under pressure, so I was never anxious for tests. I then graduated, got my first job, and that's when things started to change a little bit in terms of anxiety. The anxiety was the big one for me. I've noticed that, especially on my first projects, you don't know what you don't know, right? It's pretty standard in the firms I was at that the senior reviewers were only reviewing kind of the high-level project, and they put it on us, the more junior people at the time, to ensure that there's no mistakes or anything like that. Oftentimes they would they would redline everything. You'd get markups, but really it was still on us to make sure that the small stuff was taken care of, and which is totally fair. That's something that I think is really important because it really builds up your confidence. But so that's when I first kind of started dealing with anxiety, like in terms of staying up late and kind of worrying about the projects or making sure like quadruple checking stuff. And that's when I realized, in school you get an 80%, you're happy, but in the real world, you need 100 on everything. And let's say you do even 10 projects a year, you need to get 100% on 10 projects. That's something that you've never been used to in school. In school, you do maybe 20 projects a year, you get 85 on them, and you're doing great. But that's the thing I've realized in the real world is there's no great. It has to be perfect every time. That means making sure all your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted, and that there's not going to be any issues. Some of the issues that would keep me up were not the building falling down or something failing. It'd be that I would miss a detail and it would cause rework in the field. So back then we were doing a lot of detailing. So let's say I was designing a connection and we didn't account for certain measurements and no one picked it up. Then there would be some rework and there would be additional cost to the firm, and that's something that was I wanted to avoid. That was again prior to becoming a professional engineer. When I became a professional engineer, that's kind of when it went up to the next level, when I was stamping my own designs. That's again, we had checklists, we had everything in place to make it very easy to not worry about it. But in the back of my mind, it was almost the same thing. You need to make sure that the design is perfect so that there's no future rework, there's no future issues, and there's no loss of life. That's when the loss of life was really a big deal to me, because back then I had the senior reviewers that were making sure that everything was okay. Again, it was almost high level, but they still made sure everything was okay. Now I was the one taking on that responsibility, and just the fact that you're putting your stamp on something, it really makes you question everything. Like I remember nights I was staying at the office super late to quadruple check my work to make sure that nothing was missed. And so yeah, sometimes it was overkill, but there was a couple of times that I did find some silly mistakes that now I would laugh at. But those are the things that I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing. I was almost thinking that anxiety makes you a better engineer, and it's unfortunately I think it's kind of true. You need to have that certain level of fear when you design, and that's something I've been trying to work at over the years. Is essentially being able to get to 100% without that, because that wasn't healthy for me. I gained a lot of weight during that time. I was always working. I wasn't spending time with my family, my kids. And hindsight, like I didn't handle it the best way. I think talking to people about it, talking to friends, something I realized too is a lot of my friends were in the same role, but none of us were really talking about it. I think we should talk about it. I think it should be a little bit more normalized that we are all going through the same thing, and especially in the early years of my career. This was probably within the first 4 years that it was kind of the first years of actually stamping my own stuff. That's when it kind of really hit me. Now it's not so much because I've seen a lot of the stuff before. I know exactly what to look for. I know what questions to ask. And again, we're almost upgrading our checklists. But that's something that I wish we talked about a little bit more. And I think that's something that maybe the schools or even through this YouTube channel that I could hopefully share is my experiences and finding better ways to deal with it. Because again, like I said, it was not healthy to stay up super late and always being stressed and always worrying. This anxiety was almost caused by the design side. That doesn't add on the additional factors and stress from meeting deadlines, meeting budgets, all those other things were almost piling up. And those are things that you need to learn to manage. And again, in my last video, I talked about taking care of our brain, and maybe I didn't talk about it the best way, but what I really meant was we need to start doing things so we're not always overwhelmed. Because there's so much that we take on as engineers, and I don't think we get enough credit for compared to other professions. This isn't meant to be a glorification video of engineers are awesome. This is more just to talk about the fact that engineers do take a lot of responsibility, they're under a lot of pressure, and they haven't been given the tools to deal with it in the best ways. I think that it's important to take a break when you need to. I think it's important to go for a walk, get the blood flowing, get away from those stressful situations, and have a good group of people around you to be able to share those things with. The reason why my mental health is so much better now in terms of stress management, time management, is because I've tweaked some things that were contributing to that. So again, we've beefed up our checklist, beefed up our processes to make sure that we catch everything now so we don't have to worry about it later. And again, common sense, but those are the things that we've put in place, and starting to trust our work a little bit more. And that's the whole idea behind the experience, is the more experience you have is the more you trust yourself and the less anxiety you have, which is why all associations of professional engineers across the world have an experience period that's mandatory. In most cases, it's between 3 to 5 years from what I've seen. Like anything, you need a good process to be able to get over it. I don't think I suffer from anxiety as a clinical matter. I think it's the natural human instinct of when you're worrying about something, you're anxious. That's something I just want to talk about some of the things I use to overcome it. So again, going to the gym, exercising, going for walks, spending time with my family, and making sure that I got it right the first time. Like I went through it. We did a lot of design reviews. We had peer reviews internally. That also helped. Those are all things that, again, we were doing at first, but it was almost kind of taking it to the next level and taking it on personally, and that's something that isn't too good. So for you guys, if you guys are kind of going through the same thing and early in your career, I'd recommend always going to the gym, taking a break from the project. The more you look at something, the more you'll start tormenting yourself. So I think take a break, walk away, go do something else, come back to it, and you'll realize that either it's fine or you made some mistakes. And again, like I talked about before, when you're walking or doing something else, your brain's almost thinking about what it was thinking about before, so you're trying to solve these problems in the back of your head, in your subconscious. Again, this is kind of my experience with it, and when you come back to it, you'll either find some more mistakes or realize that everything's perfect, or whatever it is, but that'll take away some of the anxiety. That, again, my own personal experience. Some of you guys might not agree with what I'm saying, but again, this is just a story. If you like these stories and these anecdotes, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, it almost helps. At 2,000 subscribers, I'm going to make a video explaining how I transitioned from being a full-time worker at an engineering firm to starting this firm and growing it to the size that it's gotten to now.